Have you ever faced a wall that seemed insurmountable? A stronghold in your life, too big, too strong, too impossible. A problem that made you want to give up before you even started, because you knew you weren't strong enough? In our journey of faith, sometimes we are faced not with people, circumstances, or difficulties, but with our own Jerichos. Things that make you falter, fear, and doubt both yourself and God. And in those moments, He doesn't promise you that you will overcome it by strength. He doesn't tell you to fight. He just says one thing: obey me. Over 3,000 years ago, there was a man named Joshua, a young leader who faced the greatest challenge of his life. Moses, the great leader who led the Israelites out of Egypt, died. Now Joshua was charged with leading millions of people into the promised land. But between them and the land was an impregnable fortress, Jericho, a city built of solid stone with two high, sturdy walls as solid as ancient fortresses. Inside were well-armed, battle-hardened soldiers, while Joshua and the Israelites were nomads, newly emerged from their desert wanderings. No one believed they could win. No military leader would bet against them. And perhaps they themselves weren't sure they could win. But then, in the midst of no one knowing what to do, God spoke. God spoke, but not for the first time. Because before this moment, there had been a long journey, 40 years in the desert. The Israelites had been delivered from Egypt by Moses, but because of their disobedience, they had wandered aimlessly, wandering in hot, dry sands, generation after generation, without ever entering the promised land. Now the great leader, Moses, had died, and the baton to lead a nation had been passed to one man, Joshua. Joshua was more than just a warrior. He was Moses' faithful servant, the one who had witnessed God's power in the wilderness, and the only one, along with Caleb, to survive 40 years of wilderness to enter the promised land. God called him, and he said, "Here I am." And now, before Joshua, before millions of Israelites, was Jericho, an impregnable city. The walls were twice as high as a man. The stone walls were thick enough for two chariots to pass side by side on top. Inside were powerful warriors, fully equipped with weapons and defensive tactics. And the Israelites, not one had ever held a sword, no siege engines, no weapons, no military advantage of any kind. They had only one thing: God's promise. This was no ordinary battle, and Joshua was no ordinary general. Behind him was a story that spanned more than 40 years. The Israelites, God's chosen people, had walked out of Egypt with the promise, "I will give you a land flowing with milk and honey." However, instead of entering the promised land in a few weeks, they wandered for 40 years in the desert. Not because God forgot His promise, but because they forgot to believe Him. The previous generation had died out in unbelief. Now a new generation, younger, less experienced, but more hungry than ever, was standing at the gates of the promised land. And their guide was no longer Moses, who had parted the Red Sea, called water from the rock, and spoken to God face to face. Moses was dead. The next chosen man was Joshua, a man of faith, courage, and service. He was not loud, he was not powerful, but he had one thing that no one could take away: absolute trust in Jehovah. And as they prepared to enter the promised land, the first challenge that faced them, not the crops, not the climate, was a city, Jericho. One of the most fortified cities of its time. High, thick walls with a double-layered defense system, protected by a skilled and experienced army. A real wall, both literally and figuratively. Joshua looked up at the city. The people stood behind him, waiting. No one knew what the next step would be. They had nothing in their hands but a promise. In this situation of a hair's breadth, when all eyes were on Joshua waiting for a strategy, perhaps everyone would have expected him to gather his strongest warriors, plan a night attack, or build siege engines. But God said something completely different. You and your soldiers march around the city once a day for 6 days. No fighting, no destroying, no shouting. Just march. Then on the 7th day, the last day, march around the city 7 times, and then blow the trumpet, and the people shout loudly. And then the city will fall. This strategy had no military logic whatsoever. No general in ancient times or modern times would have bet on such a plan. It went against all knowledge of war, defense, and attack. But Joshua, without question, no questions asked, no details asked, no proof asked, he just listened and obeyed, because he understood something profound. True victory does not come from man, it comes from the one who promised. Joshua did not need to understand it all, he just needed to believe. He did not need to calculate the odds, he just needed to follow what God said. And so, the next morning, a most extraordinary scene unfolded in the sunlight. A group of people, no swords, no shouting, marched silently around the walls of Jericho. No fighting, no breaking, just walking. Joshua gave the command from God to the people. No questions asked, no objections. And then, the first day began. Thousands of people marching around the walls in absolute silence. There was only the steady sound of footsteps, the wind blowing through the cracks in the rocks, and the holy sound of trumpets blowing ahead from the priests at the head. No voice, no laughter, no shouts of defiance to the enemy. Just walking. They circled the city and then quietly returned to camp. Nothing happened. The second day, they walked again. Another circle around the city. Nothing happened. The third day, the fourth day, the fifth day, the sixth day. Still nothing had changed. The walls still stood. The enemies on high might have laughed. The people of the city might have thought them crazy. But the Israelites kept walking, because they believed not in what they saw, but in the one who had spoken. Faith does not consist in seeing the outcome. It consists in walking, even when nothing has happened. Day after day, their steps were silent prayers. Each step was a word. We believe. Each circle was a word of obedience. We wait according to your will. No explanation needed. No reason needed. Just absolute trust that when God speaks, every wall, no matter how high, will fall. And then, the seventh day came. The atmosphere that morning was unlike any other. The people woke up early, quiet, tense. They did not know what was coming, but everyone knew. Today was the day of decision. Joshua commanded, "Today we will march 7 times around the city, and when the priests blow the long trumpet blast, you shall shout." And so they went. The first circle, nothing. The second circle, the city stood still. Third, fourth, fifth lap. The wall remained still, unmoving. Sweat beaded on forehead. Heart pounding. No one stopped. The 6th round. The people held their breath. And then, the 7th round. The trumpet blasts from the sky, long, strong, decisive. At that moment, all the people shouted loudly, loud, in unison, straight to the earth and sky. "Shout for joy, O Israel, for the Lord has given you this city." And then, the wall began to shake, a strange tremor. From the top to the foundation, every stone cracked, and collapsed, as if an invisible hand had pushed it from above, each stone falling, dust flying. The city of Jericho, proud, strong, invincible, had collapsed, not by human strength, not by swords, spears, military might, but by the sound of trumpets, by shouts, and by faith, an extraordinary victory without a single sword strike, only obedience, and a God who never fails. Miracles do not come from human strength, but from obedience. Jericho did not fall because of a brilliant military plan. It did not fall because Joshua had a powerful army. It did not fall because the Israelites had the most advanced siege engines. It fell because one man believed. It fell because a people obeyed. Joshua did not need to understand the whole plan. He just needed to trust and follow it. The people did not need to fight with weapons. They just needed to unite, persevere, and not give up. How many times in life do we try everything, analyze, calculate, even worry ourselves to death, and forget? God does not need us to be good, does not need us to be strong. He just needs us to believe. Miracles do not happen when we control everything. Miracles happen when we walk, even though we don't see anything. Jericho. It's not just an ancient stone city in the book of Joshua. Jericho. It's a picture of the challenges in your own life. What is your Jericho? Is it a terminal illness that you've prayed about for so long and still haven't found an answer? Is it a silent fear, a sense of failure, a sense of inferiority that no one knows you have? Is it a financial door that's closing in on you, leaving you helpless despite your best efforts? Or is it a broken relationship, a broken family, a friend who can't be saved? What wall stands between you and God's promise? And the big question is, what will you do? Will you give up because you see no way out? Or will you walk like Joshua, with nothing in your hands but a promise? There are victories that come not from human strength, but from faith in God. You don't have to understand, just believe. You don't have to be strong, just walk. Because when you walk in faith, God will do the rest. There are walls in life that cannot be broken by hand, cannot be climbed by strength, cannot be overcome by reason. But God doesn't call you to be strong. He only calls you to obey. Like Joshua did, like the Israelites who walked day after day without seeing anything. They believed and they walked. What about you? When you have no way to break down the wall, obey, walk, trust, and you will see the Jericho of your life will fall.